Hello, first grade. I am back with Old Mother Westwind. We have 3 chapters left in our story. So I am going to attempt to read them all for you right now. And then we'll finish our story, and then I'll post a story you can listen to over spring break. So this is a cautionary tale. This is the tale of Tommy Trout who didn't mind. Now, when they say mind, they mean didn't obey, didn't listen to, did not do as he was told. And there is a consequence. Okay, this is called The Tale of Tommy Trout Who Didn't Mind. In the Laughing Brook, which ripples and sings all day long, lived Mr. Trout and Mrs. Trout and a whole lot of little trouts. There were so many little trouts that Mr. and Mrs. Trout were kept very busy indeed, getting breakfast and dinner and supper for them, and watching out for them, and teaching them how to swim, and how to catch foolish little flies that sometimes fell on the water, and how to keep out of the way of big hungry fish, and sharp-eyed Mr. Kingfisher, and big men and little boys who came fishing with hooks and lines. Now, all the little trouts were very, very good and minded just what Mrs. Trout told them. All but Tommy Trout. For Tommy Trout, oh dear, dear, Tommy Trout never could listen right away. He always had to wait a little instead of minding when he was spoken to. Tommy Trout did not mean to be bad. Oh dear, no. He just wanted to have his own way. And because Tommy Trout had his own way and did not mind Mrs. Trout, there isn't any Tommy Trout now. No, sir. There isn't as much as one little blue spot on his beautiful little coat left. Why? All because Tommy Trout did not mind. One day, when round, red Mr. Sun was shining and the Laughing Brook was singing on its way to join the big river, Mrs. Trout started out to get some nice plump flies for dinner. All the little trouts were playing in their little pool, safe behind the big rock. Before she started, Mrs. Trout called all the little trouts around her and told them not to leave the little pool while she was gone, for, she said, something dreadful might happen to you. All the little trouts except Tommy Trout promised that they would surely stay inside the little pool. Then they all began to jump and chase each other and play as happy as could be, all but Tommy Trout. As soon as Mrs. Trout had started, Tommy Trout swam off by himself to the edge of the pool. And there she's going off, and there he goes, not listening to her. I wonder what's on the other side of the big rock, said Tommy Trout. The sun is shining and the brook is laughing, and nothing could happen if I go just a little speck of the way. So when no one was looking, Tommy Trout slipped out of the safe little pool where all the other little trouts were playing. He swam just a little speck of the way, but he couldn't see around the big rock. So he swam just a little speck of the way farther still. Now he could see almost around the big rock. Then he swam just a little speck of the way farther, and oh dear, dear, he looked right into the mouth of a great big fish called Mr. Pickerel, who was very fond of little trout and would like to eat one for breakfast every day. Aha, said Mr. Pickerel, opening his big mouth very wide. Tommy Trout turned to run back to the dear safe little pool where all the other little trouts were playing so happily, but he was too late. Into that great big mouth he went instead, and Mr. Pickerel swallowed him whole. Aha, said Mr. Pickerel, I like little trouts. And nothing more was ever heard of Tommy Trout, who wouldn't mind. So that was a cautionary tale. Okay, the next story has a happier ending, and this one is called Little Joe Otter's Slippery Slide. Little Joe Otter and Billy Mink had been playing together around the Smiling Pool all one sunshiny morning. They had been fishing and had taken home a fine dinner of trout for old Grandfather Mink and blind old Granny Otter. They had played tag with the Merry Little Breezes. They had been in all kinds of mischief, and now just didn't know what to do. They were sitting side by side on the big rock, trying to push each other off into the Smiling Pool. Round, smiling Mr. Red Sun made the green meadow very warm indeed, and Reddy Fox came over the tall grass, heard them splashing and shouting and having such a good time that he wished he liked nice cool water and that he could swim too. "I've thought of something," cried Little Joe Otter. "What is it?" cried Billy Mink. Little Joe Otter looked wise and said nothing. "Something to eat?" asked Billy Mink. "No," said Little Joe Otter. "I don't believe you've thought of anything at all," said Billy Mink. "I have too," said Little Joe Otter. "It's something to do." "What?" demanded Billy Mink. Just then Little Joe Otter spied Jerry Muskrat. "Hey, Jerry Muskrat, come over here," he called. Jerry Muskrat swam across the big rock and climbed up beside Billy Mink and Little Joe Otter. "What are you fellers doing?" asked Jerry Muskrat. "Having some fun," said Billy Mink. "Little Joe Otter has thought of something to do, but I don't know what it is." "Let's make a slide," cried Little Joe Otter. "Show us how," said Billy Mink. So Little Joe Otter found a nice smooth place on the bank, and Billy Mink and Jerry Muskrat brought mud and helped him pat it down smoothly until they had the loveliest, slipperiest slide in the world. Then Little Joe Otter climbed up the bank to the top of the slippery slide and lay down flat on his stomach. Billy Mink gave him a push, and away he went down the slippery slide, splash, into the Smiling Pool. Then Jerry Muskrat tried it, and after him Billy Mink. They all did it over and over again. Sometimes they went down the slippery slide on their backs, sometimes flat on their stomachs, sometimes head first, sometimes feet first. Oh, such fun they did have. Even Grandfather Frog came over and tried the slippery slide. Johnny Chuck over in the Green Meadows heard the noise and stole down the lone little path to see. Jimmy Skunk was looking for beetles up on the hill. He heard the noise and forgot that he hadn't had breakfast. Reddy Fox, taking a nap, woke up and hurried over to watch the fun. And last of all came Peter Rabbit. Little Joe Otter saw them coming. "Hello, Peter Rabbit," he shouted. "Come and try the slippery slide." Now, Peter Rabbit couldn't swim, so he pretended that he didn't want to. "I've left my bathing suit at home," said Peter Rabbit. "Never mind," said Billy Mink. "Mr. Sun will dry you off." "And we'll help," cried the Merry Little Breezes of Old Mother West Wind. But Peter Rabbit shook his head. "No." Faster and faster went Billy Mink and Little Joe Otter and Jerry Muskrat and Old Grandfather Frog down that slippery slide into the Smiling Pool. Peter Rabbit kept coming nearer and nearer until finally he stood right at the top of the slippery slide. Billy Mink crept up behind him very softly and gave him a push. Peter Rabbit's long legs flew out from under him and he sat down with a thump on the slippery slide. "Oh!" cried Peter Rabbit in surprise and tried to stop himself, but he couldn't do it. And so away he went down the slippery slide, splash, into the Smiling Pool. "Ha ha ha ha!" laughed Billy Mink. "Ho ho ho ho!" laughed Little Joe Otter. "Hee hee hee!" laughed Jerry Muskrat. And Old Grandfather Frog and Sammy Jay and Jimmy Skunk and Reddy Fox and Blacky the Crow and Mr. Kingfisher all laughed, for you know Peter Rabbit was forever playing jokes on them. Poor Peter Rabbit. The water got in his eyes and went up his nose and into his mouth and made him choke and sputter. And then he couldn't get back on the bank, for you know Peter Rabbit couldn't swim. When Little Joe Otter saw what a dreadful time Peter Rabbit was having, he dove into the Smiling Pool and took a hold of one of Peter Rabbit's long ears. Billy Mink swam out and took a hold of the other long ear. Jerry Muskrat swam under Peter Rabbit and took a hold of him on his back. Then, with Old Grandfather Frog swimming ahead, they took Peter Rabbit right across the Smiling Pool and pulled him out onto the grassy bank, where it was nice and warm. All the Merry Little Breezes of Old Mother West Wind came over and helped Mr. Sun dry Peter Rabbit off. Then they all sat down together and watched Little Joe Otter turn a somersault right down the slippery slide. Well, that was fun. Okay, and this is our last chapter. So this one is called Spotty the Turtle Wins the Race. All the little people who lived in the Green Meadows and in the Smiling Pool and along the Laughing Brook were to have a holiday. The Merry Little Breezes of Old Mother West Wind had been very busy, oh, very busy indeed, sending word to all the Merry Little Meadow folks. You see, Peter Rabbit had been boasting on how fast he could run. Reddy Fox was quite sure he could run faster than Peter Rabbit. Billy Mink, who can move so quickly you can hardly even see him, was sure that neither Peter Rabbit nor Reddy Fox could run as fast as he could. They all met up one day beside the Smiling Pool, and they agreed that old Grandfather Frog should decide who was the swiftest. Now, Grandfather Frog was accounted very wise. You see, he had lived a long time, oh, very much longer than any of the others, and therefore, because of the wisdom of his age, Grandfather Frog was always called on to decide all disputes. He sat on his green lily pad while Billy Mink sat on the big rock and Peter Rabbit and Reddy Fox sat on the bank. Each in turn told why he thought he was the fastest. Old Grandfather Frog listened and listened, and never a word until they were all through. When they had finished, he stopped to catch a foolish green fly, and then he said, "Chug-a-rum! The best way to decide who is the swiftest is to have a race." So it was agreed that Peter Rabbit and Reddy Fox and Billy Mink should start together from the old butternut tree on one edge of the Green Meadows, race all the way across the Green Meadows to the little hill on the other side, and each bring back a nut from the big hickory tree which grew there. The one who first reached the old butternut tree with a hickory nut would be declared the winner. The Merry Little Breezes flew about all over the Green Meadow, telling everyone about the race, and everyone planned to be there. It was a beautiful summer day. Mr. Sun smiled and smiled, and the more he smiled, the warmer it grew. Everyone was there to see the race. Striped Chipmunk, Happy Jack Squirrel, Sammy Jay, Blacky the Crow, Hooty the Owl, Bobby Coon, all sat up in an old butternut tree, where it was cool and shady. Johnny Chuck, Jerry Muskrat, Jimmy Skunk, Little Joe Otter, Grandfather Frog, and even old Mr. Toad were there. And last of all came Spotty the Turtle. Now, Spotty the Turtle is a very slow walker, and he cannot run at all. When Peter Rabbit saw him coming up towards the old butternut tree, he shouted, "Come, Spotty, why don't you want to race with us?" Everybody laughed because, Spotty is so very, very slow. But Spotty didn't laugh, and he didn't get cross because everyone else laughed. "There is a wise old saying, Peter Rabbit," said Spotty the Turtle, "which shows that those who run fastest do not always reach a place first. I think I will enter this race." Everyone thought that this was the best joke they ever heard for a long time, and they all laughed harder than ever. They all agreed that Spotty the Turtle should start in the race too. So they all stood in a row, Peter Rabbit first, then Billy Mink, then Reddy Fox, and right beside Reddy Fox, Spotty the Turtle. "Are you ready?" asked Grandfather Frog. "Go!" And away went Peter Rabbit with great big jumps, and after him went Billy Mink, so fast that he was just a little brown streak going through the tall grass. Side by side with him ran Reddy Fox. Now, just as they started, Spotty the Turtle reached up and grabbed the long hair on the end of Reddy's big tail. Of course, Reddy Fox couldn't have stopped to shake him off because Peter Rabbit and Billy Mink were running so fast that he had to run his very fastest and bestest to keep up with them. But he didn't even know that Spotty the Turtle was there. You see, Spotty is not very heavy, and Reddy Fox was so excited that he did not notice that his big tail was heavier than normal. The Merry Little Breezes flew along too to see that the race was fair. Peter Rabbit went with great big jumps. Whenever he came to a little bush, he jumped right over it, for Peter Rabbit's legs are long and meant for jumping. Billy Mink is so slim that he slipped between the bushes and through the long grass like a little brown streak. Reddy Fox, who was bigger than either Peter Rabbit or Billy Mink, had no trouble at all keeping up with them. Not one of them noticed that Spotty the Turtle was hanging on fast to the end of Reddy Fox's tail. Now, just at the foot of the little hill on which a big hickory tree grew was a little pond. It wasn't very wide, but it was quite long. Billy Mink remembered this pond, and he chuckled to himself as he raced along, for he knew that Peter the Rabbit couldn't swim. And he knew that Reddy Fox does not like the water, so therefore both of them would have to run around it. He himself can swim even faster than he can run. The more he thought of this, the more foolish it seemed that he should hurry on such a warm day. For, Billy Mink thought to himself, even if they reach the pond first, they will have to run all the way around it, when I can just swim across it and cool off while I'm swimming. I will surely get there first. So Billy Mink ran slower and slower, and pretty soon he had dropped behind. Mr. Sun, round and red, looking down, smiled and smiled to see the race. The more he smiled, the warmer it grew. Now Peter Rabbit had a thick gray coat, and Reddy Fox had a thick red coat, and they both began to get very, very warm. Peter Rabbit did not make such long jumps as when he first started the race. Reddy Fox began to feel very thirsty, and his tongue hung out. Now that Billy Mink was behind them, they thought they didn't need to hurry so. And here's a picture of them. They're starting to get out of breath, sweat. Peter Rabbit reached the little pond first. He had not thought of the pond when he agreed to enter this race. He stopped right on the edge of it and sat down upon his hind legs. Right across, he could see the big hickory tree, so near, yet so far, for he knew that he must now run around the pond and then back again, and that was a long, long way. In just a moment, Reddy Fox ran out of the bushes, and Reddy felt very much the same as Peter Rabbit did. Way, way behind them was Billy Mink, trotting along comfortably and chuckling to himself. Peter Rabbit looked at Reddy Fox in dismay, and Reddy Fox looked at Peter Rabbit in dismay. Then they both looked at Billy Mink and remembered that Billy Mink could just swim right across. Then off Peter Rabbit started as fast as he could go around the pond one way, and Reddy Fox started around the pond the other way. They were so excited that neither of them noticed a little splash in the pond. That splash was Spotty the Turtle, who had let go of Reddy's tail and was now swimming across the pond. For you know that Spotty is indeed a splendid swimmer. Only once or twice he stuck his little black nose up to get some air. The rest of the time he swam under the water, and no one but the Merry Little Breezes saw him. Right across he swam and climbed up the bank, right under the hickory tree. Now, there were just 3 nuts left under the hickory tree. 2 of these Spotty took down to the edge of the pool and buried in the mud. The other he took in his mouth, and then he started back across the pond. Just as he reached the other shore, up trotted Billy Mink. But Billy Mink didn't see Spotty. He was too intent watching Reddy Fox and Peter Rabbit, who were now only halfway around the pond. He jumped in with a splash. My, how good that water did feel. He didn't have to hurry now, because he felt sure this race was his win. So he swam around and chased some fish and had a beautiful time in the water cooling off. By and by, he looked up and saw that Peter Rabbit was almost around the pond on one side, and Reddy Fox was almost around the pond on the other side. They both looked so tired and hot and discouraged. Then Billy Mink swam slowly across and climbed out on the bank under the big hickory tree. But where were the nuts? Look as he would, he could not see a nut anywhere. Yet the Merry Little Breezes had said there were 3 nuts lying under the hickory tree. Billy Mink ran this way and he ran that way. He was still running around, poking over the leaves and looking under the twigs and looking under the pieces of bark when Peter Rabbit and Reddy Fox came up. Then they too began to look under the leaves and under the bark. They pawed around in the grass. They hunted in every nook and cranny, but not a nut could they find. They were tired and cross and hot, and they accused Billy Mink of having hidden the nuts. Billy Mink shouted and insisted that he had not hidden the nuts, and he had not found the nuts, and when they saw how hard he was hunting, they believed him. All afternoon they hunted and hunted and hunted, and all afternoon Spotty the Turtle, with the nut in his mouth, was slowly, oh so slowly, crawling back across the green meadows toward the old butternut tree. Round, red Mr. Sun was getting very close to the Purple Hills where he goes to bed every night, and all the little meadow folks were getting ready to go to their homes. They were wondering and wondering what could have happened to the racers when Sammy Jay spied the Merry Little Breezes dancing across the green meadows. "Here come the Merry Little Breezes. They will tell us who wins the race," cried Sammy Jay. When the Merry Little Breezes reached the old butternut tree, all the little meadow folks crowded around them. But the Merry Little Breezes just laughed and wouldn't say a word. Then All of a sudden, out of the tall meadow grass crept Spotty the Turtle, and he laid the hickory nut at the feet of Grandfather Frog. Old Grandfather Frog was so surprised that he actually let go of a green fly that was buzzing past his nose. "Where did you get that hickory nut?" asked Grandfather Frog. "Under the big hickory tree on the hill on the other side of the green meadow," said Spotty. Then all the Merry Little Breezes clapped their hands and shouted, "He did, he did, he did! Spotty wins the race." Then they told how Spotty reached the pond by clinging to the tip of Reddy Fox's tail, and he had hidden the other nuts, and then how he had patiently crawled home while Billy Mink and Reddy Fox and Peter Rabbit were hunting and hunting and hunting for the nuts that they could not find. And so Spotty the Turtle was awarded the race, and to this day, Peter Rabbit and Reddy Fox and Billy Mink cannot bear the sight of a hickory nut. And that was the final story. So all these good tales about all these animals, and such an old classic book. So I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I hope you have a great spring break. I look forward to seeing you guys on Seesaw when we get back from break, and I will try to post some reading that you can do over break. Okay, bye for now.